Hello and welcome to another edition of the Blood Red Morning Bulletin. My name is Emmet, and today I'm joined by my fellow Liverpool.com colleague Dave Comerford. And Dave, we're kind of in the full, well, I wouldn't necessarily say the full swing of transfer rumours, but the transfer rumours are gathering pace as the season ends, and we're kind of in that weird area between the transfer market officially opening and the end of the season, and there's really nothing going on in the football world. So therefore, rumours tend to generate seemingly by themselves. And obviously, we've seen Liverpool obviously do official business with Darwin Nunez being announced this week. But yet you're seeing a lot of players being linked with Liverpool that not necessarily make any sense. So one of them is Milan's Rafael Leao, and reports are saying that he's rejected a new contract offer from Milan, and Liverpool are one of the clubs interested in him. Do you think? What do you think of transfer gossip in general this time of the year? Should be taken with a pinch of salt? And B, what are your thoughts and feelings on a potential Leao move?
Well, to start with the first part of the question, I think there's a risk now, especially because we saw yesterday a lot of journalists reporting that the likelihood was that Ramsay, the right back, was going to be Liverpool's third and final signing of the summer. And you look at that and you think, is that just kind of posturing from Liverpool? Because if they kind of make it clear that they want a midfielder, maybe that affects them from a kind of negotiation standpoint. That's possible. My instinct is to kind of believe it, to be honest, based on how the club have sort of dealt in the past. So with that kind of information, you start to think, are the links that do emerge, are they going to be just, agent driven and things like that, players trying to get better contracts, things like that. So I think we do have to be sort of wary and take it with a pinch of salt, like you say. In terms of Leao, I think probably not one for Liverpool for sort of this transfer window, or maybe January, but it could be, a case that they're monitoring, I'd say, because I think there will be a lot of, the very best sides in Europe. And I know AC Milan won Serie A, but they're not quite sort of in that bracket in terms of their overall quality. So there is certainly a step up to be made from them. I think a lot of those teams will be monitoring him because of just how good he was last season. I think, against us, for example, even in that Champions League game at Anfield, I think it was the first match day, AC Milan hadn't really had anything the whole game. And then really, I think he gets an assist for the first goal, and then the second goal all sort of stems from him sort of going on a run past two or three of our defenders. So he was someone who could just change the game in an instant, really, and he showed his quality on that stage, certainly. And in Serie A, I think it was 11 goals, 10 assists. He won the, I think it's called the MVP award in Italy for the best player in the league. So I think it is only a matter of time before he gets a big move. Maybe that's why he's apparently rejected this contract offer. So we'll see how that one pans out. What's interesting is, if you look at his actual style of play, he comes out as quite similar to Diaz. So I guess on the one hand, you're like, well, he's the kind of player Liverpool would like. And then on the other, you'd say, well, maybe they have someone who's kind of similar. So it's probably one to just kind of keep an eye on it and see how it pans out, because I do certainly think that if not Liverpool, he will end up joining one of Liverpool's rivals, whether that's a domestic rival or someone who Liverpool might be competing with in the Champions League.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing with Leao, is that in the second half of the season, he was Milan's clutch player. He came up in the big moments with either an assist or a goal. Like, I think in the last 5 games in their title running, either scored or assisted in every game. So he had this reputation as being a rough diamond, but he's slowly being becoming more and more polished. And I think we saw that in the second half of the season. I think he scored out of his 11, I think 7 of them come in the second half of the season just past. And he was a big part in Milan winning their first title for 11 years. But as you say, the way Milan play with a 4-2-3-1, he's always on the left. So he basically essentially plays in Luis Diaz's position. And considering Liverpool just paid, 37 million for Diaz, 5 months ago, I doubt they're going to sign Leao this summer and use him in the same position as Diaz. And Leao isn't going to arrive to be Diaz's backup. So I don't really see how this one can really play out. But I mean, it is, as you say, it's one to keep an eye on for the future. And one deal that does actually seem to be happening is Aberdeen's Calvin Ramsay. Do you think that's a good signing, or do you think it's one that Liverpool need to make, or what are your general feelings on that deal?
Well, it's interesting the whole transfer situation generally. I mean, you've got these three players that will have come in. The backup right back in the form of Ramsey. You've got Carvalho who can play sort of attacking midfield forward, and then obviously Nunez who is the replacement for Mane in all likelihood. So you look at that and you think to yourself, does it make Liverpool stronger next season? Those three deals, and probably not when you consider the players that'll be leaving. We could see obviously Mane, but also players like Origi, Minamino, Oxlade-Chamberlain, Neco Williams all leaving. So maybe in the short term, not so much. But all three are players who are sort of to varying degrees, quite raw and will kind of improve a lot over the next few years. And I think that is something that applies to Ramsey. And I think maybe the hope at Liverpool is that he certainly has a higher ceiling than Neco Williams, or at least he's someone who's got similar potential and maybe will be more willing to kind of play that backup role to Trent Alexander-Arnold, which is obviously not the ideal position to be in, you'd have to say, given that Trent is probably the best player in his position. So, yeah, I like what I've heard so far. To be fair, I think it's a good pickup. It's one of them where you look at the fee, which I think is around sort of 5 million, maybe some add-ons in there, and you think to yourself, if he wasn't playing for Aberdeen, if he'd come through at a lower level Premier League club, for example, you're probably going to end up paying quite a bit more than that. So I think it'll turn out to be good value for money. He looks like a good kind of match stylistically for Alexander-Arnold as well. I think he got like 7 assists last season. And considering, he's an 18-year-old and Aberdeen aren't sort of right at the top, certainly of the Scottish Premiership, then you'd have to say it looks decent business from that point of view. I do think, though, that it's one of them where next season we probably only see him against league, against Championship and League One teams, really, in the cup competitions. And then maybe sort of 18 months, 2 years down the line, he starts to become an option for sort of rotational Premier League minutes. So, yeah, not a signing certainly for this season in terms of, I don't think he'll be able to play a Kostas Tsimikas type role straight off the bat, but hopefully in sort of the medium term, he will be able to take on that role and show that it is what it looks to be, which is a bargain.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult one, isn't it, when it comes to right back, because the club do need a right back, a backup right back. But everyone knows that Trent is going to start. If he's fit, he's going to start 99% of the time. So it's Liverpool need to sign a player who's willing to accept sitting on the bench for the vast majority of the season and maybe getting 5 or 6 games when either Trent is either suspended or injured. I know that's a difficult situation for the club to be in. It's kind of like the same with Fabinho. Like I believe the club need a backup for Fabinho, given that nobody in the Liverpool midfield can play the number 6 role the way he does, the way he interprets the role. But at the same time, any player that Liverpool are interested in, they're going to know that they're not really going to play that often. So that position on right back is very tricky. And as you say, Ramsey's going to come in. He's probably not going to play too many games this season, but again, he's young, so he can afford to bide his time, maybe the next couple of years. But with Trent being himself only 23, you kind of think, is right back, a right back, is your future really going to be that secure going to play at Liverpool where you're really not going to get that many games? Definitely for the next 4 or 5 years, unless, Trent suffers a serious injury or whatever. So it's definitely a very tricky situation for the club to try and bring someone in. But yeah, as you say, there could be a loan move on the cards maybe within the next couple of years, or he just maybe learns from Trent and then maybe eventually one day takes over. I mean, it's difficult to say, but I do think it is a very tricky position for the club to be in terms of finding a backup. But yeah, Dave, that'll do us for today. Thanks very much for joining me, and be sure to check out all the content on Blood Red and all the written content on Liverpool.com, and we'll catch you next time.